Hello, welcome to Real Deal Fantasy HQ. I'm Cody Rear at CodyRear24 on Twitter, and today we're going to be breaking down the Miami Dolphins fantasy outlook for 2020. Let's get it. So, as a whole, there's not much that I'm really going to break down on the Dolphins in 2020. As you know, they're not an incredible team. They finished 5th last year, had the 5th overall picked Tua Tagovailoa. Good for them. But we are going to break down some key pieces of that offense. And there is some really good talent in Miami, and you got to know where to find it. So, without further ado, we're going to start with the number 5 overall pick in Tua Tagovailoa. Out of Alabama, phenomenal quarterback. Came off of a scary hip fracture. And that surgery isn't something that I think the Dolphins are going to push for him to start right away. So I don't think he's going to begin to start the season. And they have a veteran in Ryan Fitzpatrick who is going to do what the Dolphins need them to do. Obviously, they're not competing for a championship right now, but they are trying to win games. And I think Ryan Fitzpatrick gives him a chance to do that. So I'm staying away from Tua in redraft. I don't think he's going to have a ton of value. He's going to have to learn a system that's completely new, build rapport with his wide receivers, and he's not going to have the opportunity to do that in camp. And if he doesn't get the starting job until later in the season, it could be a little tough. He might have some late season value. Tua's not a huge runner. He can add some value with his legs, but he's no Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Josh Allen. But he could be a decent waiver wire pickup from week to week late in the season. But I'm definitely staying away as far as draft day goes. We're going to get a lot more clarity as we get closer to the season once he gets into the Dolphins medical facility and they can have the doctors view him in-house. Maybe he starts the season on the PUP list, physically unable to perform. But we'll see. Miami was 13th in passing yards last year, which is much higher than I thought they were going to be at first glance. So Tua does have some upside once he gets the job. So next we're going to, we mentioned Ryan Fitzpatrick, so let's talk about him here. Right? Last year he finished as quarterback 17. Now, you have to take into account that he did not start all 16 games. Josh Rosen, for some unknown reason, took snaps for Miami this year. And now, granted, I'm not taking Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's going to lose his job, so obviously you can't rely on him to be your quarterback for the entire season. He could have some fill-in value early, especially with some of those earlier bye week games. Ryan Fitzpatrick quietly had a really good fantasy playoffs, really performed the last 3-4 weeks of the year. So if you think you can get some value out of him for the first couple of weeks, he might be worth picking up and using as a waiver wire spot for some of those quarterbacks who have early buys. So we start with the passing, right? We're going to go to the Dolphins running game, and we're going to go with Matt Breida, right? So the Dolphins brought in 2 running backs this year. They traded away Kenyon Drake last year to the Cardinals, middle of the season, and they really didn't have a steady lead running back in that offense. So they went out and signed 2 running backs this year. They got Matt Breida and they got Jordan Howard. Personally, I'm a bigger fan of Jordan Howard than Matt Breida, and here's why. So Breida was great in San Francisco last year. He was really efficient with the touches that he got, but crowded backfield, so thus they trade him to Miami. Miami was dead last in rushing yards per game and attempts per game. Granted, they were playing from behind a majority of the season. So, obviously, when you're playing from behind, you're not going to run the ball as much. But I'm not a huge fan of Breida in this offense. I don't think the offensive line or the scheme in Miami is nearly as good as San Francisco. What Kyle Shanahan has been able to do with that rushing offense down in the Bay Area has been phenomenal, and I don't think that they're going to be able to repeat that in Miami. They did draft an offensive tackle in Austin Jackson out of USC. I think that was a great pick, getting him late in the first round. But I don't think that's going to fix their offensive line woes. Their offensive line was great last year, and it's not going to be good this year. Matt Breida is an explosive guy, but injuries have hampered his career in the past. He's missed games every single season. I don't think he's going to stay healthy all 16 games. And when it comes to it, comparing it like a thunder and lightning backfield a little bit, Matt Breida is explosive. He's explosive. He has the big play capability, and he's going to be their third down back. He catches balls very well. But I think Jordan Howard is the thunder in this offense. And he finished last year's running back 38. I have him ranked as my running back 32. His current ADP is running back 49, which, I mean, I am surprised he's out of the top 40. While that Miami offense is bad, I think they are better in 2020. But with Jordan Howard, all of the bad things in Miami's offense still hold true. They added 2 running backs to the offense, offensive tackle. Since his rookie year in Chicago, his fantasy points per game have gone down or stayed the same in the last 3 years. Now, do I think that's partly opportunity? Splitting the backfield when he was in Philly happens. He had to split the backfield with Tariq Cohen when he was in Chicago. I think that Jordan Howard in this offense has the most touchdown opportunity, which is why I value him above Matt Breida. But that being said, I am still not relying on either of these guys as other than, maybe a flex, matchup dependent flex, running back depth on my roster. I don't want to go into the 2020 season with one of my 2 starting running backs being a Miami Dolphins running back. That's just how I feel. I don't think Jordan Howard has incredible fantasy potential, but I think he does get the majority of the goal line work that will happen. Miami doesn't rush a lot from the goal line. They tend to pass when they're, within 20 in the red zone. So we'll see. So we're going to break down those wide receivers. And this is where the ratings get a little spicy, right? Miami's wide receivers are vastly underrated and under-talked about, and they performed well last year. And you're thinking, oh, who do they have? Devontae Parker? Yeah, okay. Who's the other guy across from him? Got hurt. Preston Williams. Devontae Parker has been the bane of my existence in fantasy for the first 3 years of his career. Absolute bane of my existence. Last year was the first year he played all 16 games. And more importantly than anything, and this cannot be understated when you talk about Miami and you talk about Devontae Parker, he is no longer playing with Adam Gase as his head coach. And that cannot be understated, right? Parker was dominant last year. Finished as wide receiver 11, right? He was great from beginning to end. He was much more consistent. And he was a guy you could count on from week to week, right? We have a full video of Devontae Parker on our page. I know LQ is not as high on him as I am, but I think Devontae Parker performs this year. I think he bounces back, and I think you can get him at a value, and here's what I mean. Miami's going to have better quarterback play this year. At the very least, they're not going to play Josh Rosen, thank God. But Ryan Fitzpatrick is decent. He's shown to be able to lead fantasy-relevant wide receivers in the past when he was in Tampa Bay. Mike Evans succeeded very well with him at quarterback. And Miami's still going to play from behind. That defense is still terrible. They're garbage. They're dumpster trash, right? Preston Williams, I know people are, particularly LQ, I'm looking at you when I talk about this, but Preston Williams, odds are, is going to start the year on the physically unable to perform list, right? Tore his ACL in week 9. I don't think he's going to be able to come back. So here's where you can get value in Devontae Parker, all right? If you're taking notes, if you're thinking about anything from this video, the whole video, this is what I want you to take away from this. His current ADP is wide receiver 34. He finished last year as wide receiver 11. That is a 23 position difference, right? And here is why you can count on Devontae Parker in 2020. Adam Gase is gone. That offense is no longer stagnant. Finally, they have a coach who understands the talent that Devontae Parker has. He's going to get the ball. I talked before when I talked about Miami quarterbacks. They were 13th in passing yards last year, top half of the league. If you can get the number 1 wide receiver who should have a majority of the target share all year with Preston Williams starting on the PUP list in the top half of the league's passing yards, why are you waiting until wide receiver 34 to draft him? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. Simply put, the volume is there for him to be successful. Now, if he gets hurt, It's a little bit different story, and that's something you gotta risk. But where he's going, wide receiver 34, I am taking Devontae Parker in as many fantasy leagues this year as I can. So now let's break down Preston Williams, right? Preston Williams finished last year as wide receiver 72. He is not ranked for me this year. He's not ranked in my top 40. His current ADP is wide receiver 57. I think that's fair. Preston Williams tore his ACL in week 9 of last year against the Jets. Up to that point, he had 60 targets, 32 catches, 428 yards, 3 touchdowns, right? Over 16 game stretch, that's 64 catches on 120 targets, 856 yards, 6 touchdowns. That's worth 185.6 fantasy points, right? That would have been wide receiver 34 last year. He's likely to start the year on the PUP list, so I am not drafting him in redraft. Unless if you have an injury slot, right? This is my money in the bank. I'm doing this in every single league that I have an injury slot. I am drafting Preston Williams with my last pick to put him in that IR spot. He was great in Miami last year when he had opportunities as a rookie with dog shit quarterback play. Terrible quarterback play. Preston Williams was incredible last year. He put up roughly the same numbers as Devontae Parker. Now, let's look at 2 wide receivers who are similar in size and skill set and both have the capability of putting up top 30 wide receiver seasons, right? Preston Williams would have finished out the year. He'd have been wide receiver 34. Devontae Parker finished the year as wide receiver 11 in PPR formats. Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, pass-heavy offense. Both have the capability of finishing in the top 30. Miami's wide receivers have that same capability. Now, obviously, Preston Williams isn't going to do that this year, right? Because he's going to start on the PUP list. But if you can get that talent and store him in your IR spot, you're going to be sitting pretty come playoff time when you have a usable wide receiver that you spent no draft capital on. If you have an IR spot, I'm begging you, there is no one better right now. Granted, preseason injuries happen, than Preston Williams. Take him. All right. Then we're going to go to tight end, right? Mike Gesicki, tight end out of Penn State, right? Couple years in the league now. Tight ends take a little while to develop, right? He finished last year as tight end 11, okay? Much better than his rookie campaign. His rookie campaign under Adam Gase, crazy eyes Adam Gase, was a building year. I mean, it was a building year. You can basically take that year up as a wash. But in the first year where Mike Gesicki has played in a competent offense, he almost finished as a top 10 tight end. Finished as tight end 11, just outside the top 10. I have him ranked as my tight end 12, right? I think he's going to put up very similar numbers that he did to last year. I like him. I like Mike Gesicki. He's rangy. He's tall. He is going to excel in the red zone and over the middle. He's going to do a great job in that offense. Tight ends take a little longer to develop, right? You see some rookies that take some time. George Kittle took a little time, right? He's going to excel. He was the 7th most targeted tight end last season. And let me give you this long list of all the offensive weapons, pass catchers that Miami added in the draft this year. Nobody. So they didn't add any other weapons, right? Preston Williams is still going to start the year on the PUP list. Mike Gesicki is going to be a target hog in that offense, and you can get him way later than you were getting a lot of the other tight ends. His current ADP is tight end 16. He finished last year as tight end 11 in an offense that was very, very, very bad. I mean, they were just bad. In what should be better quarterback play, better offensive line play, another year in that system, I think Mike Gesicki is going to be a solid tight end play. I'm going to be pairing Mike Gesicki with guys who may or may not end up on that injury list. Evan Ingram's done it the past couple of years. If you grab Evan Ingram early, maybe shore up that position with Mike Gesicki. I think you're not going to be sorry you did that. Rob Gronkowski hasn't played a full year in a while, right? Coming out of retirement. I think Mike Gesicki, another guy in Florida, I think that would be a good thing that you could do in order to shore up that tight end spot. And honestly, if I go in with him as my tight end 1 this year, I'm not upset. I'm not upset. There are a lot worse you could do. All right, now we're going to wrap it up. I ain't talking about this often. Miami's defense, they're garbage, terrible, trash. Don't draft them. If you draft them, I mean, you need to just reevaluate every other fantasy pick that you drafted up to that point. They are terrible. Just don't draft them, right? So, thank you guys for checking out this video. For more fantasy football content and football content in general, you can follow me on Twitter at CodyRear24, but most importantly, follow Real Deal Fantasy at Twitter, on Instagram. Subscribe, right? Subscribe to the video for more content like this. We had the Bills video that I put up before. We got some hot takes. We're talking Calvin Ridley and DJ Moore. All on this page, all your fantasy content, all football season long, both in the off season to get you ready for the draft and during the season to make sure that you're whooping your buddies' asses. Real Deal Fantasy HQ, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.